Tails and Knuckles, and Sonic. At first, Sonic didn't understand it. He was more confused than anything when Knuckles would invite him to play baseball, and for Tails to rush into the room 5 seconds later, asking if he wanted to go get ice cream. He adapted to usually going with whoever asked first, definitely not missing the sad frowns and pointed glares the two would give each other. It was just strange.
Sorry, Knucklehead. I promised Tails I'd help him with his science fair project. It's due next week.
The blue blur shrugged simply, having just been invited to play base-of-ball, as Knuckles liked to call it.
I do not understand. I did not think you enjoyed the science.
Knuckles tilted his head, turning his head in the slightest to glare at the fox, who stuck his tongue out in response as he got his project situated on the kitchen table.
I don't usually, but when you promise someone something, you don't ever break it. Besides, he's excited to show me his ideas, and I like that stupid grin on his face.
Sonic snorted a small laugh, and it wasn't a lie. He genuinely did enjoy seeing his little brother smile, even if he didn't understand why science made him smile.
I see, but promises are physically unbreakable.
That alone ruptured a laugh out of the blur.
No, it's just...
He hummed as he flecked through words in his head to try and help the Echidna understand.
If I told you that we'd play baseball tomorrow, but I'd do something with Tails instead, wouldn't that make you a little bit sad?
I suppose so, Hedgehog.
Knuckles huffed, beginning to understand.
I see. It is like a metaphor, a declaration that you will do something.
Yeah, you got it.
Sonic lightly socked the boy in the shoulder to show his pride.
I'm sure Mom or Dad would go play baseball with you. So.
Sonic, it's ready to start.
Tails interrupted easily, a slight edge to his tone as he watched his brothers interact. Sonic grinned and flashed Knuckles a thumbs up.
Maybe some other time, Knucklehead.
And though he didn't need to use his speed in the house, it was even discouraged half of the time. He didn't hesitate to dissipate into a blue streak, appearing beside Tails at the table in a millisecond. It was still strange, Sonic thought as Knuckles lingered in the kitchen doorway before hesitantly stepping toward the living room, where he could hear him ask Maddie to accompany him on a walk with Ozzy. She had agreed, of course. She usually always did. He mentally noted Knuckles lingering, listening as Tails explained his project, and as Maddie hooked Ozzy's lace to his collar. Knuckles was usually such a straightforward person. He really questioned if he had a thought process at all, always acting and speaking before processing. He shook his head out of overanalyzing his older brother, choosing to focus more on Tails. He'd practically been begging for his attention the last 3 days in a row, and he wouldn't let anything divide it now. He could think about that later, perhaps a few cities over while doing not-so-super-secret hero activities, with a lot less destruction. He did not need another conversation with Tom in the middle of the lake. Sonic had filed that away for later, but surprisingly to nobody, he had completely forgotten about the incident with Knuckles, and mostly because the two had taken a break from asking him to do anything with either of them. And sure, that should have triggered alarm bells in his head, but it didn't, at least, not until a few days later.
Sonic!
Knuckles stepped outside with his brother, watching as he threw a ball for Ozzy to continuously retrieve.
Would you like to accompany me for ice cream? Lady Madeline informed me of the ice flavors this month.
You know what? Sure.
He'd begun to speak but was swiftly interrupted by Tails swinging open the back door, panting heavily.
Sonic, Tom said we could head to the baseball field and play.
All right, that was enough of that. It was going on week 3 of them suggesting two extremely contradictory bonding activities, tripping over the other, trying to be louder. Sonic sighed as he scratched at the back of his neck, glancing between both of his brothers, watching as they eyed him and then each other. He felt like his arms were being tugged in 2 different directions, and neither side was going to let go, that was clear.
Why don't we go get ice cream and then play baseball, all 3 of us?
He suggested, glancing at Tom and Maddie at the kitchen table. Even as they merely shrugged, he knew that they had at least an inkling of what was going on.
But I want to get ice cream.
And I would like to avoid engaging in sports this afternoon.
The blur groaned lightly, narrowing his eyes as he watched the two suddenly share a glare. He dragged his hand off his neck when he felt something brush up against his leg, turning his gaze down to Ozzy, who was wagging his tail with the ball in his mouth. He smiled softly, reaching down to take the ball, throwing it again. He hummed, having an epiphany.
I think I'm just gonna chill with Ozzy today.
Sonic shifted on his feet, shrugging his shoulders. If there wasn't something the 3 of them could enjoy together, then he'd take his space.
You guys can handle yourselves, right?
The 2 brothers stood there stunned, eyes wide from the shock of their brother declining both of their offers to hang out with the family dog. They'd been prepared to hear him agree to one not to avoid them altogether. They'd honestly been ready to fight each other. Even how was Ozzy's company more fulfilling than theirs?
I just...
Tails slowly murmured out, turning to walk back inside the house with a frown. And as much as Sonic hated seeing him disappointed, the constant pulling in 2 directions was exhausting.
I recognize your decision, though I do not like it.
Knuckles, one as always, stated before following the kid inside, probably up to their room or maybe the living room. Sonic watched them exasperatedly, gazing at Tom and Maddie as they hauled themselves up from their seats and joined him out of the porch. He turned his attention back to Ozzy when he felt the ball hit his shoes, hearing it bounce on the deck a few times before picking it up in his hands and tossing it like he would a baseball.
Do you guys know what that's about?
He frowned, asking his parents without giving them his attention.
Well, kid, it seems like they just want to spend some time with you.
Tom shrugged, ruffling his boy's fur before sitting down in a fold-out chair.
Blueberry, they just want to hang out with their brother.
Maddie agreed with a nod.
But they're pulling me every which way, and they have been for weeks. I don't know why they want compromise.
He sighed and dramatically waved his hands about, pouting as he finally turned to look at them once again.
I know I had trouble being the middle kid for a few weeks, but now instead of all of us fighting for your attention, they're fighting for mine.
Tom inhaled sharply through his nose at the reminder of Sonic struggling to be a middle child, struggling to share him and Maddie with Knuckles and Tails. The first 2 weeks with 2 new kids, 2 new brothers, had been hard, to say the least. Sonic had so much of nothing growing up that he'd acted out when he had everything he ever wanted, worried that the divided attention meant he'd eventually be alone, forgotten or given up on. Again, it'd been hard.
Well, but
He eventually pulled himself out of his head when he saw Maddie throw the ball for Ozzy as Sonic wandered over to him, leaning his head on his dad's shoulder.
why did you start to fight for our attention?
Sonic huffed and narrowed his eyes at seemingly nothing.
Because I was scared that I'd lose you guys, that you wouldn't care about me as much anymore, I guess. I felt like you were giving up on me, that you forgot I was there.
Tom hauled his son up onto his lap, smiling softly to Maddie as he hugged their kid close.
And what happened before you talked to us?
I got irritated with the Tails and Knuckles, and I snapped at you guys too. It felt like everything you guys did together was the end of the world.
He cringed as the words left his mouth, hearing how absolutely stupid they sounded. It was embarrassing, really, sitting on his dad's lap while they talked about how he'd once felt, not yet understanding the point he was trying to make. Why revisit those terrible emotions? It wasn't like the knot in his stomach wouldn't come back if he thought about it too hard.
And what are Tails and Knuckles doing?
Maddie tilted her head as she kneeled down in front of both her husband and her son, Ozzy seeming to finally keep the ball to himself after being tuckered out from the continuous running. Sonic furrowed his eyebrows once he heard the question, glancing at his dad before searching his mom's face for the answer, but it quickly seemed to click in his mind as he examined her face. They are pulling him every which way because they are scared of losing him, of him shoving them aside, wanting his undivided attention because they care and they want him to care. It was like placing the last few puzzle pieces together and understanding the bigger picture.
They're fighting over my attention because they want me to keep spending time with them. They don't want to be forgotten or shoved aside again.
He let out a soft breath as he swiftly turned his gaze between Tom and Maddie.
And they want compromise because one-on-one time is different.
There you go.
Maddie ruffled the fur between his ears before caressing one of them with her fingers.
You're a smart boy, my smart boy.
She giggled as she snatched him up from Tom's lap, ignoring her husband's groans of annoyance.
Hey, that my cat, got your own.
Tom glared without any real anger as he stood up, his arms reaching for Sonic, but Maddie quickly turned and held the boy to her chest.
He has our last name, therefore he's also my kid.
Sonic snorted a laugh as she ran her fingers through his fur and held him close to her chest, the two starting a small fight that would end in nothing but smiles and laughter because it was simply all jokes. As he watched them, his mind drifted back to Tails and Knuckles. Every frown, every glare or shove, it all made sense now. It made a lot of sense mostly because he'd already lived it.
As much as I've seen you guys fight over me, your favorite kid in the universe, I think I have some important business matters to attend to.
He pulled away from Maddie's chest, giggling when he saw the betrayed expression on her face, but it was easily replaced with a small smile and kiss to his forehead.
Make sure they know you love them.
Maddie said. Tom grinned softly as he stepped forward to ruffle his son's fur, nearly surprised that he wasn't barking up a storm about his cools being messed with. Apparently it took hours to achieve the look Sonic had, but he knew it didn't. He watched the boy wake up on countless occasions.
I will.
Sonic nodded determinedly before disappearing into a blur once he was out of Maddie's arms.
He knows we love him, right?
Maddie asked joyfully, anxiously twirling her wedding ring around her finger, staring into the house. It seemed talking about the little kid situation had only set Tom a little on edge, but her too.
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, whatever.
He supplied her easily, wrapping an arm around her shoulders as he gazed at the stairs that led to the attic. It wasn't a complete fix, his reassurance, but it was a simple one for the time being. Sonic had zipped up the stairs without sparing a second thought. Bursting into the attic he was momentarily sharing with his brothers. Well, he'd be sharing it with Tails for the rest of their lives. But Knuckles was eventually going to move into the basement when Tom and Maddie finished renovating it. That is, he tugged his lips into a tight frown when he saw Knuckles holding the emerald and Tails spread out across the bottom bunk on their bunk, reading something that he could only deem as homework. Linted.
Okay, guys?
He huffed and clapped his hands together, not wavering when the two of them jumped and eagerly laid their eyes on him.
We're going to talk, and then go get ice cream.
The confusion was as clear as ever through the room, but a wave of guilt washed through as Sonic sat on the edge of Tails' bed, beckoning Knuckles over as he did, motioning for Tails to sit up and give enough room for Sonic to scoot over, letting Knuckles occupy his other side. He didn't hesitate to throw his arms around both of their shoulders, pulling Tails flush against his side and only tugging Knuckles as close as he'd allow.
I know you guys have been fighting for my attention.
He felt both of them tense under his arms, though Tails was a lot more prominent.
I'm not mad about it.
He quickly ushered out, making that very known.
I'm really not, I promise, but you guys have to stop.
I'm sorry, Sonic.
Tails frowned, his gaze lifting swiftly when Sonic furrowed his eyebrows and looked at him.
Things are different now, I know, but
You want one-on-one time.
He smiled softly, easily supplying the words, leaving Tails to nod dumbly.
And you don't want me to shove you aside.
He turned his gaze to Knuckles then, taking the silence as a confirmation.
I can't promise one-on-one time with you guys all the time. Okay, that's a lot of attention to split up, and it'll get pretty exhausting, but I can promise that we'll always have time together.
He knew that answer wouldn't be satisfying, especially as Tails leaned into his side and Knuckles shifted closer.
I am sorry.
Knuckles murmured.
We were not trying to upset you with our trivial arguments. We appreciate your attention. That is all. We enjoy our time with you, though I do not say it often.
Sonic huffed a laugh, nodding his head in understanding, because he truly did understand, probably more than the two will ever know.
I get it, and I love spending time with you guys too. You're my brothers, I'll always want to spend time with you, and I don't like one of you more than the other.
He smiled sincerely, shifting his gaze between the two.
And brothers fight? At least I think they do. TV shows say they fight, and Maddie and Rachel fight, and I don't think we're too different from them.
He shook his head, realizing he was trailing off topic, but it pulled a chuckle from Tails.
We can fight all day long, or you two can fight all day long, and we'll still love each other at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Tails lifted his head, straightening his posture as he nodded, genuinely seeing the importance in his brother's monologue, and he couldn't help but snort a laugh when he saw Knuckles nod his head.
I suppose he's...
Great.
Sonic grinned, squeezing the two against his sides.
Can we start compromising? Meet in the middle somewhere. If you don't want ice cream or you don't want to play baseball, can we come up with something else for all three of us?
I heard Wade say the park was finally fixed.
Tails looked at Knuckles, examining his face, or that's what it at least looked like to Sonic. It became easier to differentiate emotions on people's faces, especially the look of I'm not mad, just disappointed.
What is a park?
And, oh gosh, Sonic could not stand for that. You've never lived if you've never been to a park, but he would say that about most things, like baseball, ice cream, and Tom and Maddie. There was truly no one else like them.
That's it. We're going to a park, and we're getting ice cream.
He announced as he hauled himself up, tugging Tails along with him.
I'd race you, but we all know I'd win.
That's so not true.
I could beat you so hard, Hedgehog.
Oh, I'd love to see you both try.
And Sonic knew that the issue wasn't completely fixed. He knew there'd still be bumps in the road. He was still having bumps in his own. But if Tom and Maddie were there, if they were all there together, they'd be able to fix it, smooth it out, Forgive and forget? His brothers meant everything to him, even when they fought and bickered like there was no tomorrow, and he wanted nothing more for them to have the relaxed life he knew they needed.